Good morning again. Back from a little break. We're going to spend some time with Abby Willard and Steve Collier on an act relating to miscellaneous ag subjects, section one. Who would like to lead off?
I'm happy to. That's okay, Chair.
The floor is yours.
Great. Good morning.
Good morning, Ed.
For the record, I'm Abby Willard, Vermont Agency of Agriculture. I'm the director of our Ag Development Division. So I am not your RAP or municipal zoning subject matter expert. You have Steve here, I think, for a little bit more of that, but I can speak, I think, mostly to, if it would please the committee, the why behind where this change makes a difference to agriculture in Vermont. And having Steve here, I think, can be a helpful backup if there's more of the technical questions. And you've heard from him in the committee already this session, but
Yes.
I'd be happy to share more if you're interested. So I wanted to start by just sharing, I think, a bit about the process that's happened over the past, I don't know how long it's been, maybe starting in the summer, to come up with these recommended changes in response to the Taft Supreme Court case. It's felt really important to be in partnership with the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, talking with them, understanding the Act 181 responsibilities that they have, and thinking about kind of the relationship that we have and share with them. And we have an established relationship from our accessory on-farm business engagements, and I'll talk about that a little bit. We also engaged with a variety of ag groups, which was, important constituency for us to hear from, for them to tell us where there's gaps, where there's been challenges around ag zoning and exemptions. And then for the agency to also come at it from the perspective of that our responsibility is, regulatory enforcement of and compliance within the ag community, thinking about the importance of food security, and to the best intent possible, having food production happening on parts of the land in Vermont where it best makes sense for those businesses to thrive. And I think lastly, an objective that we have is really thinking about agriculture production and ag land is not just about open land. It's not just land that's accessible to be used for whatever purpose, but it's actually its wisest and best use to be utilized for food production. Okay, so next I just wanted to then share a little bit about what.
Comment a little bit about that.
Yeah.
A lot of what we're trying to outline, where we agree with that. I mean, we're touching in a lot of areas, whether we have a bill or not, we're at least getting some conversations going, especially the last part about using ag land for best use purposes. And so we are going to continue on that vein. We actually have something in our miscellaneous bill. We have some things about solar siting and stuff like that we're going to get to. So we'll be seeking your guys' advice as far as on that. We're probably unprepared. I talk at length with a lot of people, especially within the Agency of Agriculture, about our position on that. And I guess our position is we don't have a position yet, but we have a lot of conversations going on that. So anytime that you hear that we are in discussions on any of that, we would welcome any conversations.
Great.
We're very nervous about looking in the future 300 years from now and seeing that we don't have any ag land. We have the history of looking at other states, but we also have, as Senator Heffernan has brought up more than once, about private property rights, with farmers and stuff like that. So I think at some point in time we need to find that balance of where that conversation goes.
Great. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And maybe I'm going to share things with you that you've heard before. I think some of the information and the examples and the anecdotes that I'll offer are probably pieces of history in agriculture that you're already aware of. So tell me to hurry along if this is not anything new in this concept. Yeah.
We would never tell you to hurry.
Okay.
So please, but he might do this.
I'll know.
Our motto's taught us better.
I appreciate that. Well, I think you know that agriculture and food systems in Vermont is over $1 billion industry, which is a huge kind of contribution to the economy of our state. And yet that happens on less than 9% of the land in the state, which is a pretty significant contribution. And we've seen that agricultural land decline over time. So since 2017, we've lost nearly 73,000 acres to agricultural production. So these conversations
Just when, I'm
feel-
sorry,
since 2017,
and we lost how much?
nearly 73,000 acres. So there is an urgency to
And
sort
that
of like.
by ag land?
Agriculturally used land, so some of it may be statewide significant, some of it may be prime excellence.
What is that, is this in percentage?
So let's see, there's 1.2 million acres in agricultural use. About, I think half of that is in actual productive ag use. So what is 73,000 of?
You didn't know you'd have to do math.
I did not, yeah.
I'm just gonna say it's a lot.
If it was 50,000 acres, 500 million, that would be 10%.
But
So we're about,
Yeah, honestly, I'd have to do a calculator, which maybe Senator Pumpkin studied for us.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I was thinking, slightly over more than 1%.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right,
Okay.
Right.
yeah.
okay.
And I think some of the projections that have been offered by organizations like American Farmland Trust sort of say that there's a risk of another 41,000 acres potentially being lost towards food production. So the food security goals, the ability to feed ourselves and to remain kind of a agricultural state sort of really do feel quite fragilely concerning and at risk when we think about access to agricultural land. We also recognize our place in the region. So we've shared these statistics with this committee in the past, but the New England Feeding New England agenda plans to bring about another 900,000 acres into ag production across the New England region to be able to reach the goal of going from where we are currently at 21% of regional food is being produced and consumed within the region. And the goal is to get to by 2030 to get to 30%. So that would mean about doubling the amount of agricultural land in Vermont to be able to make a contribution towards that goal.
And my biggest question to that is a good goal, but do we have the people to achieve that goal? Do we have the farmers that want to do that?
Yeah.
It's one thing to say it, but if you never have people that want to pursue that industry, it's just not going to happen.
Well, I think that's a little bit of where restoring municipal ag, exemption feels valuable. We have businesses moving to Vermont, engaging in Vermont, choosing to start agricultural businesses all the time. I mean, we don't have a system where we track the number of inquiries that we receive every year or the number of new businesses that start every year. Unfortunately, we're still seeing a net loss in farms in the state, so it's a difficult measure to kind of track. But utilizing the Agency of Agriculture as that as a metric, we get phone calls all year long, even in the winter, of entrepreneurs that want to start ag businesses in the state, and they have questions about how they access financial assistance, or do they need a business plan, or can they grow this product and do they need a permit to be able to sell it at a farmer's market? And they want to build a farm stand, and what do they need to do to be able to sell direct to consumer right from their home?
Well, I think the group that we had in here just before you, which was the John Ramsey's group
Yeah.
from Hardwick, and again, a lot of what this committee has taken on, which is protecting all these people who just want to get a start. I mean, I think that is, it lends to what you're talking about.
Yeah, and the Center for an Ag Economy has some pretty good data. No, he probably shared it with you of the number of businesses in their Vermont Food Venture Center kitchen that
Yeah.
they've had
Yeah.
since since they opened and when they moved from Fairfax to Hardwick. And there was, a big growth at the beginning, and then things got a little bit slim around COVID. And now they're back to production that exceeds where they were pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And they're moved from Hardwick.
Yeah.
And that is an indication of the number of cottage businesses and small producers that are wanting to produce new products. But we were just there on a tour of Vermont and food in New Hampshire Food Hub interested partners, and there was in the facility they were making a hot maple syrup cream.
Yep.
And it was delicious. Yeah. Spicy, but like really good. Yeah, really spicy. And then they were, processing, I don't even remember how many thousands of pounds of fresh cut products. So this
Yeah.
is all like surplus potatoes,
Yeah.
other root vegetables, carrots, etc., that then gets chopped and frozen and then is sourced to institutional markets.
I was there this summer and they were doing some chopped, but they were also doing, they had a granola company in there, that was some mixing and packaging and stuff. And yeah.
Well, and then the next phase is we then hear from those businesses, and actually the individual that was in there making the hot maple cream comes to us and says, I think we're about ready to expand beyond this kind of like commercial kitchen space that we can rent once a week.
Right.
And we need to put in our own facility.
Right.
It's all of our maple syrup. It's all of our hot peppers that we make. So it's all principally produced. And we need both land and some infrastructure to be able to continue to grow our business. Like, how can you help us make that happen? And so that ends up being a lot of the, and I can talk about that in a moment too, of just like the evolution and the change that we're seeing in agriculture and the growth that businesses are exploring to remain resilient. And that kind of diversification and vertical integration on farm is happening in every sector. And that's the piece where there's like a real potential for agriculture to grow and I think thrive. And we're grateful, like we need the food venture centers and the food hubs to be able to kind of like incubate those businesses until they've reached the scale and have the customer base and the sales to be able to, expand production on their own and have a bit of their own facility or even a somewhat larger shared facility, which is happening as well. The vulnerability that agriculture is facing in this desire to achieve resiliency, we've really seen in the last 3 years because of 2 years of flooding and a year of drought. So in all the data and all the conversations that we've had, we're hearing from farmers that they're looking for more land. Sometimes they're looking for land that's further from streams and rivers that could flood. Sometimes they're looking for land that's not such droughty soils. Like that's become a conversation in the last year, given last year's drought. We're hearing some farms need to be closer to an irrigation system. So that might mean they need to be actually in proximity to surface water where they can pump from a pond or from a stream. And in some cases, they're just recognizing that they need additional acreage to respond to the demand that they're receiving for their product. Or looking at additional water sources, like where they've had a well that went dry, they need land that has a better water supply. So not only are we hearing from new farmers that want to start and we're seeing this diversification happen, businesses are also having to adjust given the climate conditions that are kind of routinely impacting their business and land. So then I wanted to touch on the diversification trends that we're seeing. So since a lot of our data comes from the ag census. So it's 2022 data that we get a year or two later, and that's collected every 5 years. So between 2017 and 2022, we saw vegetable sales increase by 70%. And much of our vegetable production happens on small acreage. And a lot of that acreage is happening on flat land, best soils, well-drained, open space that you could imagine is targeted for lots of different uses, but also really ideal for vegetable production. We saw poultry and egg sales in that same 5-year time frame increase by 87%. And that's because there's the opportunity for small scale operations, and then they're able to aggregate their product and sell it at a farm stand of someone else that grows produce and raises meat. We're seeing some increased on-farm poultry processing that's happening for their own meat. So again, principally produced product on their farm, being able to be processed on their farm. And similar growth in the livestock production sector as well. And this isn't surprising to us. This is like those innovations that we anticipated and that we've really tried to incentivize. And a lot of your investments, the financial assistance and programming that you've provided our agency and our division of development over the past 5 years has really been focused on looking at new production models, thinking about innovative processes, thinking about the infrastructure needs that are required to be able to do more of this, like on-farm expansion. So farms are doing that. Like, so we used to be, I mean, it depends on how far back I guess they used to be. Like, we used to be a state that produced fluid milk. Now our growth is in value-added dairy production. It's in making cheese and butter, on-farm creameries, making caramels, lots of value-added products in the dairy industry. And that's not alone. So the produce industry, they're making sauerkrauts and they're doing frozen fruits. They're making other products, all of which can be grown on their farm and still be considered under, the concept of farming. There's this whole other side, which is like the accessory on-farm business doing more of the processing, which is also happening, which is what businesses are really looking to. And we've talked about that in this committee over the past couple of years. We've met with small businesses that are just growing herbs and being able to dry those herbs, package them and sell them at like really high-end retail markets and online. The like innovation and entrepreneurism in Vermont is always impressive. And you see that in agriculture as many other sectors as well. We're also seeing businesses that are deciding that the best market for them is to just focus on, say, winter storage crops that they can house on the property and sell to institutional and wholesale markets, sell it to Whole Foods or market through Deep Root. And that product goes all over the country, or at least all over the state, the region, hopefully. That takes an additional amount of infrastructure and land for them to be able to have that kind of business model, where it's different than direct to consumer, where you grow it in the season and you sell it off the farm that next week. And that's still happening too. We saw a lot of that growth occur post-COVID when the supply chain and food system felt very fragile. Thinking about the benefit that this ability to decide where agriculture operations happen and where farming occurs really feels relevant to our small operations and to our new businesses. So the average size of a farm in Vermont is about 145 acres. But I was looking at some of the granting programs that we have that are focused on specialty crops, which is produce and Christmas trees and herbs and flowers. And then some of our kind of the other granting program that we run, it's called the Resilient Food System Infrastructure Program, which is a lot of innovative, some value-added work that's happening. And the average acreage of those grantees is around 89 acres. So, bigger than 4 acres, but like still relatively small when you're thinking about the amount of land that they're looking for. And then we're hearing businesses that are on 4 acres and 10 acres that they're making a business on relatively small acreage. But as you know, and we've talked about for, unfortunately, probably a decade or more, like starting a new business in Vermont is challenging, particularly in agriculture. And sometimes locating your business close to a downtown or close to where there's a population is really helpful for the access to workforce, the access to consumers, maybe already some established infrastructure that you can take advantage of, housing for your workforce. And there's so many examples of ag producers that are really trying to solve those issues in a rural environment and struggling. And so that starts to put our agriculture in direct kind of like relationship with our development areas and our downtowns. And there's so many existing examples of businesses in those environments. Many of our new American communities are farming in kind of like Vermont urban areas. So in Burlington, in Winooski, in Colchester, and with very successful businesses kind of like in those downtown areas. And other, Rutland and Brattleboro and other communities as well. Additionally, we have like the Interville Center or Shelburne Farms or the Retreat Farm or Billings Farm that are all examples of businesses that have like farm businesses that have made a connection to community and being accessible to trails or to walkable distance from schools are all critical aspects of their business being successful.
Could I, and, you know, Billings Farm being in my district
Right.
and being the place where I learned how to milk a cow for the first time is an example of that. And also, where I, saw a cow do number 2 for the first time.
First time.
For the first time, and was, taken aback. Let's just say that.
Fun and go.
Well, I stepped in it, so I give.
We always do that.
Yes, I'm not saying literally anything. So, but you're right on, and it is an example of how to reach out to the community.
Yeah.
So,
And their proximity is close to where the residential
yes,
kind of
very much so.
hub of a community is
Yeah.
often located. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it takes it in Woodstock it takes advantage of it exponentially.
Yeah, we were just at Billings Farm last week for the Connecticut Rivers Farmer Association annual meeting.
Yeah.
And right along the river.
Yeah.
And it's like at an intersection of, traveled roadways in Woodstock. And there were, an unbelievable number of farmers at this meeting talking about both the creative opportunities that they see and the innovative strategies that they're making as businesses and kind of like bonded together in this watershed group around, particularly they were talking about like their water quality strategies, shared equipment, and the ways in which they can form their own ag community. And that requires being in close proximity. That means that you're like in relationship and in connection with one another, not isolated up in the hills and not talking to one another, but actually like feeling part of a community. And I think we're fortunate to have a lot of that in place in Vermont. So if there was a question of why our agency feels it's critical to restore the municipal ag zoning exemption, I thought I could just touch really quickly on like the uniqueness that our agency plays. And this is not exactly my area of expertise. Laura DiPietro, who's the director of our water quality division, would be a good person.
But she is coming in.
Oh, good.
She's coming in, tomorrow.
Wonderful.
So we can.
So you can hear from her on
can
like the
hear.
logistics, but
I think what would be helpful for us.
Yeah.
And I don't want to speak for the committee because I want them to speak for themselves. So I'm going to say what would be helpful for me. I think that we are in agreement. I would say that we're in agreement. Again, the committee will speak for themselves. Why it's important. For me, it's being able to understand the language of what we're saying, so that we can go out and sell this to the rest of the building, which is what we got to do. Which we're very fortunate. I think that we do have broad support within this building, for the most part. So it's not a big sell. I just want all of us talking the same language to
Yeah.
why it's there. And I think that's probably pretty. Yeah. So, I mean,
Yeah.
So if you can, get us to, so this is, again, speaking for myself, my committee will speak for themselves as well. We tend to speak as one. But I think that we see it as this. And I'm not in any way, do I want to sound like I'm being adversarial to the Supreme Court. I'm not in this way. But I think the Supreme Court basically said, we made a decision based on the language that we saw, picture language. And I think this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to fix our language so they could go in a different direction. They didn't want to, for whatever reason, they chose not to interpret it any further. They chose not to look into past precedent. They just said, well, this is what it says.
Yeah.
So this is our decision. And they said, if you want a different outcome, fix your language. I think this is what this is attempting to do. And as long as we can understand that, I think that we stand a pretty good chance of getting where we want to get to. Committee?
Yeah, no, I think that pretty well sums it up. We assumed for 20+ years that it was kind of viewed that way. But when you look at the words on the paper there was another interpretation available, and that's what the Supreme Court did. But I think they are in they're not directly, I mean, none of the justices have reached out and said, hey, fix the language. It's an opportunity based on their ruling that we want to look at and change. And I've been pretty clear, if we could go back to where it was before the decision, to me, that's the best possible solution.
Sarah Pumpkin?
Yeah, and I agree with Brian on what I feel we should do is go back to where everyone understood it to be before. And if we want to do something else differently at a separate time. That'll be a discussion because the language has some changes. I appreciate what you said, Chair Ingalls, about we're not criticizing Supreme Court on this. I do want to change. I think it's just in the findings or legislative intent section, but I hope we do temper that language a little bit. It's too critical of the Supreme Court, I think. But I also understand there's a reason why it's there. We're clarifying what the statute is rather than changing what the statute is. So I want to talk about that language a little bit when we get to that.
Grants with saying so far.
Ditto.
Easy.
So
I mean, I think this, maybe I'll offer one sentiment, and maybe this, if the committee is open, this is where Steve Collier, as our general counsel, might have like a helpful perspective on kind of the language. But I want to just share that from experience, when we have been engaged with municipalities on accessory on-farm businesses, which has been, I would say, a successful relationship. Like there is a set responsibility at the Agency of Agriculture to do farm determination, and there is an accessory business responsibility at the municipality, but an education that needs to happen and in a communication and relationship building that's occurring between zoning administrators, municipal staff, and agency staff. The one thing that I will share is that the different interpretations at the individual town level has been challenging. And it has resulted in a lot of questions between farmers and town officials about the fairness and integrity that and equity that may or may not be in place between communities.
I see, and I do see that, but I see it just as much as the HM Natural Resources through some of their layers of bureaucracy, not coming to the table to have a real conversation about it. I think that there needs to be an understanding, again, not to put it back on the towns that they're not understanding as well, but I think that there is a difference between agriculture and business in the state of Vermont. As much as we want to talk about ag as a business, there's some there. So I'd like to say to the A&Rs, where's the rub? Help us figure out where this rub is and help us get past it. And I think that we can work with the towns very well. I think the towns are going to do with what they want to do. The towns actually understand the importance of what agriculture does for their communities. They see all of that. And I think that's all workable. I think our biggest battle, and I don't want to fight with the towns over that. I don't think we have to. I think that there's a path forward with that. I see our battle with the farm accessory buildings is the battle within the agencies of the state. Where's your rub with this? Come on. Let's just talk about it. Let's not just say that's the ruling. Let's talk about it. I don't see that conversation happening, which bothers me.
Said, yeah. What do you think? Is this a time? Do you want to hear a little bit more? I mean, I think there's like this whole background that exists around the regulatory authority that already kind of is encompassed in the REPs, which again, I think Lord and Petro can speak to best. But
Next week? Okay.
Which I think is just valuable to think about the fact that agriculture and farming is not an unregulated entity if it's not a part of Title 24 and part of municipal jurisdiction. I think there's a lot of thresholds and requirements and expectations that exist under the RAPs for agriculture and for farming already. But if you wanted to have the conversation about kind of like the language, either back to what the pre-tax Supreme Court conversation or decision was, and or the changes that are being proposed, I might recommend that a conversation, having Steve come and chat about that would be valuable.
I apologize. I'm not repeating that.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so. Steve, do you wanna go through our language with us on this, or what's our next steps to move along, or whatever? Committee, what do you wanna hear on this? You wanna go through the language in section 1 right now and just
Sure.
get some council idea about what it's saying?
I'm happy.
Have you done it?
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve Collier from the Agency of Agriculture. So we've discussed this already, and I guess, had to go through the language, but it's really, again, the principles, I think, that drive this discussion. And I guess back when the Supreme Court ruled in May, we tried sort of feverishly to get the legislature to undo the Supreme Court decision. You know, we had several discussions and said, look, you're still in session. Can we just make it clear that this is not what the legislature intended and maintain the status quo? And we weren't able to do that because there were different opinions about what should be done. So, and our thinking about this language, we're not just thinking about how all of you feel about it. We're certainly considering that. But most importantly, we're thinking, how can we get something that works for farmers through both chambers in this building? And there are people in some committees who think very differently than the people in this committee. And so our first step was to try to build a consensus with the League of Cities and Towns and with the farm groups, because the League of Cities and Towns obviously has a big role in municipal regulation. And we knew directly from them they did not want to go back to the status quo. And that was one of the roadblocks we faced when we tried. In fact, we even tried just put it back where it was until next session, so that we can have a fulsome legislative discussion. We got resistance for that. So the league was very cooperative in doing exactly what we asked, which was to discuss these issues. And we talked about it a lot, and they just don't feel the same way as we do about it, but mostly they do. In general, they agree that towns should not be regulating farming through zoning, which is great. But there are some areas where they want towns to be able to zone. We don't agree with that. But in trying to build a consensus that would hopefully make it easier for every committee in this building to restore the exemption, what we committed to the league was, we're not going to change our position. Our position is this language that's in front of you. We're not going to change our position. You won't change yours. So we're narrowing the issues unless both of us together can come up with something different. So that's why we have the language that we have. But actually, I think our proposal was better than it was before. I think it makes more sense. I think there were some holes in what was there before. And in trying to find a solution, it was balanced. Like, what's reasonable, what's not. I mean, you could say, and this is true for Act 250, you don't have to meet a certain farming size under Act 250. You just have to be doing a farming activity and you're exempt. And I think that's the way it used to be for zoning as well. Like, you didn't zone farming regardless of the level of the size. That changed in Vermont. And so you had to be farming under the required agricultural practices to be exempt from municipal zoning. And I don't know exactly why that changed, but I think it was probably for some of the same balance of issues. As an example, we don't need, the Agency of Agriculture probably doesn't have a place regulating 10 chickens downtown St. Johnsbury. Not that we couldn't, but we don't honestly have the staff capacity to do that. So if you're saying we're regulating that, we really can't. I mean, we can, but if we were doing that in every community throughout the state and somebody had a complaint about those chickens, we don't have the staff or the capacity to respond to that. So essentially it's unregulated, which may be fine. But our proposition is, if there's towns that do want to regulate these things and they have that capacity and it's on a tenth of an acre in the middle of town, that's fair game from our perspective. We don't want those 10 chickens to be regulated, but it's not something we can fairly regulate. So let's focus our resources because we get criticized for not being aggressive enough in enforcement. I disagree with that, but it's a criticism. And so if we're not out on the large farms and medium farms and small farms, and if we're not responding to somebody's complaint about manure spreading or an overtopping pit or whatever it is, and we're instead in downtown St. Johnsbury looking at 10 chickens, we're probably not really focusing on our broader mission very well. So it's about that balance. So when the RAP is the way it was, is basically that, as we've discussed, the default position, which you need 4 contiguous acres. That's a sizable bit of land. And
So for anybody that's confused about what an RAP would be, and for anybody listening online and all of that, RAP is a plan that's you are following as a farmer, and that's what it is. If you're following that plan, you're protected in a sense as a farmer by following this plan.
I mean, yeah, it's 2 things. What it is requirement. It's laws that farms have to follow. So they're not, I mean, it's not a good, arguably, it's not a good thing to be subject to the required agricultural practices, because that means you're then therefore responsible for, talking about from the farmer's perspective, you are now regulated and you have to meet those. A lot of towns don't have any requirements at all.
Right.
So if you're in a town with no zoning, like being subject to the required agricultural practices means it's good for water quality, has bigger, broader purposes, but it's not necessarily good for the farmer. So there's some benefits if you have 10 chickens to not being regulated at all versus having to meet maybe you can't meet the setback from the well that's required under the required agricultural practices, but maybe that's not important if you only have 10 chickens. So it's kind of a balance of interest. But yes, like the way that it's set up is the required agricultural practices apply to all farming that we regulate. But there are some farms that are so small, and we call them colloquially sub-jurisdictional, like they're below our jurisdiction, that they're not regulated by us. And the way it was set up was if we're not regulated and a town wants to regulate, then they can. So that was what was in place, and it worked pretty well. I mean, there were some issues here and there, but it mostly worked. The biggest point of contention was that you could be farming, selling $2,000 of agricultural products or filing a Schedule F. You might not have any land or very little land, and you're still subject to the RAPs, so towns couldn't zone you. And that's the case that ended up in front of the Supreme Court. You got a subdivision in Essex with a half an acre. That farmer, from our perspective, was not doing anything wrong, was doing everything right. We believed he was exempt from municipal zoning. We told him that. We told the city of Essex that. We thought the trial court got it absolutely right when they said that he can do that. We enforced we didn't enforce on him, but we responded to complaints and reviewed his property, and we thought he was meeting all the requirements that he needed to meet. But maybe that's not the best use of the state's resources for agriculture, to be on that subdivision in Essex on a half an acre. So, and the reason he met that threshold was because of the $2,000. So the $2,000 is fine, but what we're trying to look at is what should we actually be doing and what should we allow towns to do? And that's why we came back to these principles. We want everybody, regardless of whether you're selling and technically farming food, to be able to grow your own food, period. You can grow your food. If you want to raise plants, you can do that, excluding cannabis, because that's a different issue. But if you want to grow a garden, you can do that. That's not currently protected. So that's something that I think is an improvement in the proposed language. Now, people weren't regulating it that I'm aware of, but if you don't have a clear protection, somebody can regulate. So make it clear. You want to grow food, you can do that. You're not subject to something. The poultry exception that we recommend is the same thing that the Essex person had. If you want to have some backyard chickens and because you want to raise eggs and you want to have your own food and want to have meat, you should be able to do that. Now, we said small backyard poultry flock. We don't know what that, there may need to be a number on that. I don't know, but it's just right now you can't do that. Towns can regulate that. We excluded roosters because roosters obviously create some issues. But to me, that's where this is better than what we had, is we're saying to every Vermonter, you want to grow food, you want to have the small backyard flock, you can do it. That's good. But it doesn't necessarily mean the Agency of Ag needs to be there responding to a neighbor complaint and applying the RAPs. You got, now, keep in mind that the ability to have chickens is different than the ability to let your animals trespass. Towns already have the authority that if you don't properly maintain, and if you don't keep your animals in, whether it's livestock or poultry or anything, that's something the town can enforce against, because nobody has a right to let their pigs go eat somebody else's garden. So that's a different issue than this. This is just like, you can have your animals, you can raise your food. So then the question becomes, well, when should the agency of ag step in? And so that's where we try to find this balance where, okay, it was already the 4 acre was the basic standard, but we don't want to have just 4 acres because there's some viable farming operations, many on much less than 4 acres. So and some of those folks are doing things like selling products, and they need to be able to therefore have an accessory on farm business, be able to have a farm stand, be able to perhaps like sell somebody else's farm products. So we don't want to exclude people who are under 4 acres, but we want, so if you're in the business of farming and under 4 acres, then you should be covered by us. You should be exempt from zoning. So that's why we said under 4 acres is still high, but the compromise here was this prior standard was $2,000. Now that was enacted 10 years ago, so it's probably more like 3,000, 3,500 now if you just adjust for inflation. And the league wanted us to go up to $10,000 because they thought that was better. We said that's too much. That impacts too many people, and they compromised on $5,000. So that's just a compromise.
Would that have put the Essex situation out of reach at that number?
So I don't know if he could have made $5,000 or not, but the intention of this language is that the Essex situation would, if it related to livestock, it would not fall within our authority because it's less than an acre. So what we said, because that was kind of the livestock. So livestock we treated differently than all the other types of farming, because livestock are what caused a lot of the problems with neighbors. I mean, there's manure, as Senator Major pointed out.
Or at least the cannabis part of it too. We heard about the smell about that.
And cannabis isn't us.
Right. No, I get.
Yeah,
that, but-
yeah. So, but livestock are where there are issues. If you have livestock, you need to be able to manage the nutrients they need, their feed, their waste. I mean, those create a lot of issues that growing carrots don't. So that's where we try to find this balance. Of 4 acres works. You can still have livestock from 1 to 4 acres. Then you can have livestock and be covered by us, but you've got to prove, we have to be able to determine you have enough land to have the livestock you want to have. So if you're trying to put 600 cows on an acre and a half, we're going to say, no, that doesn't, you can't possibly comply with the RAPs and do that.
So the RAP discussion, what I'm hearing from the people, some concerned folks, is that by making the changes to that, it opens all up the discussion about RAPs, and it's a bigger can of worms. But you see it more as a solution to get to where we want to be, as more than anything.
I feel like we can't make the tweaks that the league has. I think arguably their requests are reasonable. We don't agree with all of them, but they have, they have their own concerns that they're trying to, and we can't compromise without changing the RAPs. To me, other people feel differently, understandably, but most people would be cut. If you have 4 acres and you're farming, you're covered. If you have less than 4 acres and you have livestock and you can manage the nutrients, you're covered. If you make $5,000, which is not nothing, but it's not a lot, you can make $5,000 pretty easily if you're farming a significant amount of produce, on under 4 acres. I think we're going to cover people who are farming, or any part of their livelihood. And we're also protecting anyone who wants to grow food and allow them to grow food and allow them to have poultry. It's just livestock that would be treated differently, more favorably in some ways. Like right now, livestock aren't covered the way it was before the Supreme Court decision. Livestock weren't covered at all, except unless you had 4 contiguous acres, except for this $2,000 Schedule F exception. So it was never really envisioned that you're going to have 600 chickens on a half an acre and meet the RAP's threshold. It wasn't, I think it probably wasn't contemplated exactly. So there's no perfect way to do this, but what we're most concerned about is getting everybody, or majority of both chambers in this building, to say towns don't regulate farming. And so I'm a lot more worried about that than I am about whether it's $5,000 or $2,000.
But the section one work, if we don't stay with that, $5,000 language, the section one work.
If you stayed with $2,000, yeah, that's absolutely, if you did that, then you would not be doing what we propose, but it would absolutely fit, and you could still protect the plants, like growing food that we suggested, the poultry that we suggested. Yeah, you could do that. That threshold does not need to change. We are asking that it does because of our agreement with the league. And I want to be clear about that, but ultimately all of you will have to make the.
Okay, so we'll park that for a minute. Everybody good with that?
Yeah.
I'll ask her some questions
Yeah.
for sure.
So to the chair's point, does amending any of the RAPs open up the possibility? Okay, now they're open, we can, I say someone could change other requirements within the RAPs. That's my first question. And I didn't know whether, I mean, if people just had common sense, maybe a lot of this wouldn't even be necessary, but sometimes people don't. Was there ever any discussion when you were talking with VLCT about a temporal threshold? In other words, if I understand, the Taft Street decision came about as a result of someone that was on that land that wasn't doing it at one point and then decided to start raising chickens, and that if he had not done that, it probably would have never happened. So, and I don't know what the right number is. Okay, if they've been there 5 years, if they've been there 10 years, I keep going back to that situation where someone will move near or next to an existing farm that's been there 100 years and then start complaining about the fact that they can smell manure, much like people move next to an airport and then they're amazed there's actually planes taking off and landing. So those are my two questions. Does the fact that we potentially would amend any of the RAPs mean that anyone could come in and say, okay, I don't like this one, let's change that? And then secondly, is there an answer for how long someone's been doing this?
Sure. So great questions. The first one is with the RAPs. I have the same concern. I don't want in general, the legislature digging into our rules, because there is some separation of powers issues there where the legislature does one thing, you tell us to write rules and you give us direction, and the executive branch does that.
Yeah.
So I do. And if we were to open up the rules in general, I think one thing you may be thinking about is if an agency goes through rulemaking, then there's a very public process, and that opens everything up for discussion.
Yeah.
This, to me, is no different than when you write any law. You could write a law repealing the RAPs. You can change the RAP. You can, write a statute that changes anything you want in the RAPs. So yes, that possibility is there.
Okay.
But I don't think it's any different. You can change the statute the same way as the RAPs. The reason for doing it with the RAPs this way is just because we're trying to stay with the framework that we had. It could be all spelled out in statute instead of the RAPs, but we feel like people who are familiar with the RAPs, the system mostly worked. And so rather than kind of creating a whole new universe, just tweaking the RAPs a little bit. But
Okay.
I don't think it's any more risk than it ever is
Okay.
when this body is trying to find a compromise. The second issue about timeliness, I think you're thinking kind of about similar to the right to farm discussion we've had in the past. And there's this, under nuisance law, there's this theory of coming to the nuisance. And traditionally, like, people are protected if you already pre-exist and someone else comes to that, the pre-existing use should be protected.
Mhm.
But we actually sort of tried to jettison that, and I think mostly did, with the right to farm
Okay.
changes because of the things that Abby was talking about. That, it's not just protecting traditional farms. It's not just protecting traditional dairy. It's trying to make everybody be able to diversify and start farming. So we don't want there to be sort of this presumption that you have to be there first. What we want is that you're farming and doing it responsibly. So it's a great point, and you're right about that. Like, people move next to a farm and then they complain about the smell. That's pretty obnoxious in some way. But we want people, limited land.
Right.
You know, if we had
Yeah.
land, if we had all the land in the world, maybe it wouldn't matter, but instead we got limited land wherever it's viable, as long as people are doing it responsibly, we want them to be
Okay.
able to.
Gotcha.
So,
Great answer.
oh, thanks.
So we've talked about that. What other things should we be paying? Is that all that we should be paying attention to in this part of this language? Is there anything else? Is there a two-part discussion on this section? I mean, we have the 2,000, the 5,000.
Yeah.
The 1, the 4, and the
Yeah.
number of animals and all that. Is there any other part in this section that we should be paying attention to help us with our argument? That makes sense? Or
Yeah,
is
it
it
does.
all, yeah.
I mean,
I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here.
understood,
Yeah.
understood. No, I think you understand that, you know, because we've really grappled with this and, you know, when we were applying the RFPs the way they were before, we understood there were some holes, there's always going to be some holes. But when, you know, I brought up the example of the goats in the basement on 1/10 of an acre downtown, like arguably they could have enough goats milk to have $2,000 and arguably they were therefore entitled to not have the town zone them. But we couldn't apply the RAPs there. They didn't have any land to manage their waste so that it wouldn't run off to the neighbor's property. But you know, so we had to make that judgment, but it was susceptible to challenge. They could have said, wait a second, there's nothing in here that says that I'm not eligible, but just looking at the REPs more broadly, there was no way they could comply. So if we did say they were subject to them, we would have been out there enforcing and telling them to stop. But that wasn't the greatest system where $2,000 is enough. So that then arguably, if you're in your kitchen raising herbs and you somehow make tea for $2,000, is that us too? I mean, it's like we want to be reasonable.
Right.
You know,
So if we don't change this, we just stick with the $2,000, we really bear the risk of not looking reasonable. Leave us alone. We didn't do anything wrong. You know, we're gonna just stay where we're at. Well, it doesn't look like we're trying to come up with a solution and to be, you know, negotiable as far as to protect farming in a way. Yes, we understand. Sorry, the ruling happened, but yeah, okay, we see you some and don't agree with you 100%. But here's our compromise to you. Is that?
I think that's a fair, you know, characterization, but I would add this caveat that the livestock is where a lot of the issues come. And so if it was, and I think this language might need to be tightened up a little bit on this point, even with the $5,000 that's in there right now, is that if you're under 4 acres and you have livestock, you can't meet this threshold unless you have an adequate land base. And I kind of wanted to get started on the conversation before we typed everything perfectly.
Sure.
But so my point is, if it was crystal clear that for livestock, you need enough land, and then the $2,000 was another avenue aside from livestock, then that's not significantly different than what we're proposing, the $5,000. But if you leave the livestock sort of loophole where $2,000 and livestock is enough, I think that's arguably not, you know, not a reasonable place to be. You raise one pig on 1/2 an acre, you slaughter it for $2,000 and you're farming and you're not subject to zoning. That arguably that's not fitting every community and every part.
Yeah. Committee, I'm not trying to dwell on this. I'm not trying to make it boring to you, and I'm not trying to do anything like that. I'm just trying to get it to a point to where, you know, where we're just really trying to be able to defend where it's at. Because you are going to get some pressures. If we stay with the language the way that it is in this bill, you're going to get a ton of pressure. I tell you where it's going to come from. It's going to come from people within our own industry. It's going to come from the Farm Bureau. It's going to come from NOFA. It's going to come, and all rightfully so. And I'm not, you know, picking on any of that stuff. But that is where your defending of this language is going. That's where you're going to get the pressure from. So you got to be good with it.
Well, one of the things that you'd asked us to do is come up with witnesses.
Yeah.
For each of these and.
Which we'll do after that.
Rural Vermont.
Yeah.
Vermont Farm Bureau, all those sort of farming groups, I think we should have come in and talk.
And I think it's important that we understand
Yeah.
why we are at where we're at. And that's what I'm just trying to get to with you guys. And
How long ago was 2000? When was that statute written?
I believe it was 2015 or 2016.
Yeah.
When that.
So
I was here
inflation,
when the RAPs.
so inflation in that
Oh, that, yeah.
You know, I'm
Right.
thinking that we're 5,000 is not too far off in the special
Well,
days time,
yeah,
you know, so that's how we justify that we decided 5,000. Because.
Which is better than 10,000.
Right.
Right,
And you're-
so it's already been negotiated once,
Yeah.
right? So it's got negotiated down to something, the position to the HC Ag can stand with, and so, yeah.
okay. The other concern that Senator Plunkett raised, I don't know how we, to use the verb misconstrue, I don't know whether that irritates the Supreme Court or not, or whether it just, I'm just raising it as a potential softening of that language. I think if we make the intent clear, maybe
Yeah,
this could.
and I'm going to do everything I can do to protect every committee member as far as on that, and if that's his concern.
Yeah.
I'm going to, make sure that he's not concerned about that anymore.
Okay,
Yeah, and that wasn't our language, but I think it's important for you to have your intent in there.
Yeah.
So that it can't be misunderstood.
Right.
But absolutely, there's no reason to be critical of the Supreme Court. It can just simply be, the understanding was different and we want to be clear about our intent.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think
Okay.
that, yeah.
I'm happy.
Are we good with that for right now?
Yeah.
Everybody's good with that? Any more questions?
You know, I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
This is just floating an idea, but this is also, the House Ag Committee is also considering this bill. And so it's going to, I think, be going through both sides, but it might make sense, perhaps, if you're gonna be hearing from all these witnesses, maybe to do it jointly if you can, maybe not.
Maybe, I just
No,
don't.
that's fine.
You know, I know all that, but you know, I'm just gonna say, I've been on a lot of joint meetings and I think that there's, as much as each body is trying not to step on anybody's toes in there, and I haven't ever had much production come out of that. I like to be able to get it right down to the bones and be able to talk with our committee about it, and that's where it's at.
Fair
I'm not a big fan of joint committees.
That makes sense. No, that
I
makes
do
sense.
appreciate that. I do. The relationship that we have in this room, and the rules that we've imposed on ourselves to follow are just a lot different. And I will go to war with these guys, and the other folks I probably won't.
I was being
And,
selfish.
You're gonna do it twice.
well, it's just,
Your honesty's good.
you know, I just like what we do.
No, absolutely.
Um,
The broader point, though, is like, it'd be great to have the two agriculture committees pushing for something similar, so.
I bet we can get there.
Yeah,
I bet we can get there in the process that we do.
yeah,
And at the end of the day, even if it gets into a conference committee of whatever, we're, yeah, I won't give up anything else. I'll just say that, yeah, I'm pretty confident of the ability of this committee. So,
well, we're so thankful for the time and attention because we do really think it's important. And
no, we do
just feel, I regret that we weren't able to stop it from happening and more effectively. So it's,
Did Essex itself appeal the Superior Court? How did it
you
get?
know, the neighbors appealed,
Okay,
but it was kind of interesting because the town, the DRB, I think, found that it was farming. And then the town, the select board, I think, overturned that finding. And I was talking to their attorney at the time, and they knew our position, but then the neighbor, I think, is the one that appealed. And then I went to the Superior Court got it, in our opinion, exactly right. So we're like, yeah, that's right, there it is. And then Supreme Court did something else. So,
well, I certainly see all sides of that issue. I see all their, to me, myself, I see all the arguments, and I think everybody's got some validity in it. And I think the part that made that the worst was the part that you guys couldn't defend, which I get, is the marijuana part. It's awful hard to do that as well. And so you couldn't fully defend that whole position because of the marijuana part of it. And I could see it's the perfect storm recipe to the disaster to why we're at where we're at. So,
yeah, and the farmer actually feels, he's told me several times, the duck farmer feels terrible that this has led to an impact much broader than It's
Yeah,
operation.
I think we all feel that. We all know
When you throw that stone in the.
Yeah, I've eaten every duck since. Anyways, yeah, so some comments you just hope they didn't, get heard, so. Okay, are we good, to get off of that for a little bit?
Sure.
Everybody's, got where we've got?
Yep.
Can we ask you for a little help, just going down through some of our miscellaneous and help on some witness help?
Sure.
About who we might wanna bring in and stuff. So I would direct everybody's, attention, whether you've got a copy of it or it's online. It is on today's agenda, just on, yeah, this page here, the miscellaneous page. And, if we can go down through, and I think section 1, we probably have, who we have, unless we ought to bring somebody in. We got Laura DePietro coming in, and going through some more, with that. Is she gonna get us to where we want to get to, you think, Collier?
Well, Laura is the one who's responsible for making what we call the farm determination to decide if somebody is required to follow the RIPs, and then she's the one who enforces the RIPs. So she's got as much information you want as what, how we do our work and
Okay.
how we enforce the RIPs. The discussion we've just had, I mean, she's been part of that, as has Abby, as the league. But I think you have a pretty good sense of how that.
And if anybody else wants to come in on that, we have her coming in when, Linda?
Next Friday.
So a week from this Friday? Okay, that's the earliest she can come in?
I believe it is, but I
can
check.
Okay. Yeah,
So I'll do, and again, just suggestion, Vermont Farm Bureau,
yeah,
other farming groups, the
yeah,
LCT,
yeah.
and then, obviously Laura would be representing the agency.
Yeah. Do we wanna, so it's been suggested that those people one of those groups or two of those groups have been suggested to come in before Laura, or do we all wanna have it in the same room? What does the committee feel is gonna be the most benefit? Is that a joint committee to where we're not gonna really dig down to the roots of it? Or is that gonna be allow everybody to talk the way they wanna talk?
Well, I don't think the diverging opinions are that far apart. I think if you did get everybody in the room at the same time, you might be likely to reach consensus more quick.
Okay,
I mean, from the agency's perspective, we have nothing but respect and appreciation for the farm groups,
right.
how invested they are in the conversation, and with the league as well. There's no hard feeling, at least from our perspective, zero
Yeah.
hard feelings. It's all,
Well,
we wanted 100% consensus, didn't get there, but got pretty close.
well, we have had some very good success this year as far as people in the, nodding their heads in the right direction, so why don't we leave it, committee, I'm gonna just suggest that we bring them all in together, everybody good with that? The only thing that I'm worried about is as what I've said to you before, the long-windedness of, we all understand, and that's the point I wanna make, we understand. Let's try to get to a consensus and let's give everybody a chance to say what they wanna say, but we don't need to have any torrent discussions, long-winded discussions about where it's at.
And I think, to your point earlier this week, it's incumbent upon us to, bring them in if that happens.
Yeah,
And I think we can do that
okay,
to get them focused.
Yeah, I agree.
okay, so,
And again, we're not talking about 38 different issues. We're
No,
talking about a
that's right.
couple
Yeah.
where if you could say, tell you what.
Yeah.
Go back and forth quickly, deal, let's go. That kind of thing.
And we left that possibility open with the league. If there was a solution that was different than where we were, we'd be happy to.
you have the league on that list?
Yes.
Okay, so you have Linda, we'll share that with Linda.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody good? Move on. Sections 4 and 5.
Tax department.
Tax department, yeah, I mean, that's what I had, the tax department, anything that you guys wanna bring into that or anything like that?
We don't have a position on this yet,
Okay.
and we may, but yes, absolutely, the tax department, we've talked to them about some of these issues before, and other people who are interested, but I would say, talk to the other people who are proposing it and to the tax department first, and we're happy if you want to hear from us.
Is that came from, Mr. Ralston? Is this what this is coming from?
No, that I believe, like I said, I think it's,
I think it did come from Paul, didn't it? No?
No, this was, I think so.
Let's find out who, proposed
I
this
thought it was
language.
somebody who was affected by this when they.
I'll talk
tried
to, Yeah.
House Committee Administrative.
yeah, but, with my dairy producers, do you think that's who it was?
I think probably.
Okay, BDPA,
I don't know that for certain.
okay, let's, I'll reach out to the BDPA about that. Okay, we good on that?
Yep.
Tax and we'll keep on working on that. Section 6, the section changes to the sale threshold when a matter or permit amended would be required to construct an accessory on-farm business. Senator May, well, I was really kind of leaning on you as far as who we've had here in the past with that.
You wanna get the LURP in here for that?
We're land use review board,
Yeah,
yeah,
DEC too.
DEC,
yeah.
so LURB and DEC. And, anybody else, in your opinion?
I mean, we don't have a position on it
Okay,
either, but we can certainly talk about it. I'd hear from others first. My concern with this issue, there's really important issues here, but we barely got what we got a couple of years ago. And this is one of those ones that opening it up is a little bit concerning. Not to say that it can't be better,
right.
but I'm also quite concerned that this one could get worse.
I'm just looking for
So
I'm looking for a compromise.
understood.
That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a serious compromise, and I guess that I could almost be satisfied if just somebody would come in and be willing to talk in that way.
And
And I haven't seen that yet.
it might be nice to talk to a couple of other committees, even privately, about the viability, only because this was amended on the floor a couple of years ago, like it was a big battle.
Was.
And we got some changes that we've been pushing for a long time, and they weren't perfect, but they were a lot better than it was for farmers. So that's my only concern with this issue, not to say that it's perfect, because it's not, but I'm worried that it could get worse. And so,
And I look at it very, very simply that we're not trying to open up the whole can of worms on it.
Right.
We're really, really not.
Right.
We really just are focused on,
right,
I'm not looking to change. There's a lot of things I don't like about all of that,
yeah.
but it's not what I'm after. It's just, give me a compromise that we can work with.
And we think that there are some things that should be more permissive.
Yeah,
Sure.
I agree.
But whether or not we can get there,
Right.
is the question. Doesn't mean it's not worth trying, but it's a sensitive issue it's not supported everywhere.
The next one, section 7, that's Paul Ralston, I think. And when Paul coming in?
Next week. Thursday.
Okay. And that's gonna be a tax. That's gonna be, is tax gonna be on that or?
Sure what's going here.
Section 7, the section, amends the definition of agricultural land to include a presumption that land is used for agriculture purposes if a certain amount of farm crops are donated.
You'd want tax. This is current.
Yeah, I
use.
think that was.
So we're gonna want tax on that, along with Paul Ralston.
Yeah.
Okay, the tax and Paul Ralston on that. Farm kitchens, the section designates a farm kitchen operation as a new category of food processing establishment. Is that gonna be land use review board?
This is the Department of Health.
Okay,
Their statutes. I'm
okay.
not sure who proposed this. It might be something Paul Ralston did, or it might be something. I think actually it probably is also Paul Ralston, but I'm not certain of that.
Maybe I'll talk to, I will, not maybe, I will talk to, Ginny on that. And get some ideas about that so that we don't overstep the bounds of committee stuff and just say that we want to have a discussion and maybe she could give me some ideas as far as for that. So I will talk to Jeannie about that.
Awesome.
This one, I think that, the next one, section 10, big discussion. It actually kind of, gets past where we have been talking about just in a big dialogue, trying to get everybody's opinions on it to actually there's a bill in the House Ag. So I think it's important that we bring in the sponsor of that bill, which would be Greg Burke, and bring him in and have him talk about that. And I'm sure that once we put that on the agenda, we're gonna probably have some other folks that want to come in that have already spoke about the people that are citing solar fields, maybe even housing. But we'll see who jumps in on that bandwagon once we put it on the agenda.
And if you dig into it, you'll probably want the Department of Public Service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also us and A&R. We don't have a position now, but.
Okay,
but it-
well-
Yeah,
So we'll put it on the agenda and see kind of what happens. We'll get the bill
Yeah.
and see where it's at.
yeah.
I think this is section 11 milk producers. I've got that from you guys.
This is awesome. And unless you have questions, I don't think you need to hear from anyone else, just correcting an error in the statute.
Okay, that's all it is. So,
Yeah.
okay.
It's-
I had co-ops written down, but
No, I mean, maybe they want to come in, but the language, it's just an error. Like it just says purchaser instead of producer, which makes no sense.
Nobody's gonna like that.
They shouldn't. I mean, it would be, can't promise, but there's no reason.
I'll just call it cleanup.
But I mean, I can come in and explain it if you want. I think I did mention it before, but it's just fixing an error that we discovered.
And maybe we would have you come in and do that. Maybe when we'll add it to something else that you're gonna be in on.
Sure.
Linda will add that to, just so that we have something, some testimony.
Yeah.
On it for what it is, and we can defend it on the floor.
Sure, of course. It's just, yeah.
Farm to school program contracts, the section would permit contracts in addition to grants for participation in the farm to school program. Is that the,
That's us.
okay,
So that would be Abby Willard. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know, she might want to have Gina Clifford come in too, but Abby's your point of contact.
okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Abby, do you know if anybody else would want to?
I don't think
I
so.
don't think so. either.
Pretty simple.
Yeah.
Big one right here. Oh, no, this one is, no, I'm sorry.
It was just
Yeah,
cleanup.
that just clean up as far as on that. I was something totally different that the house is working on.
And this could be me or nothing. It's just.
So let's add
something
you
that doesn't exist.
On section 11, we'll add you on this one right here, just clean up
Okay.
stuff when
Yeah.
we have you in.
Yeah.
And maybe at the same time, section 14, that's you guys as well.
14 and 15 through 20 are both us, and it's our plant industry division. So Steve Dwarnell, who's the director, and Stephanie Smith, who's the deputy director, would be the starting point. So I don't
Okay,
think either of those are controversial, but they can come in and explain them.
okay. Vita, we've had them in,
Yeah.
pretty self-explanatory. Again, maybe we should just have them come in one more time, or maybe not, or whatever. And just on all, the biggest thing is just to be able to, when we go to report them on the floor, we'll have a section by section. But, just be able to, for whoever's gonna report it, just be able to talk about it in a good way.
Well, Plunkett's gonna do the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, I guess when you're not here, right? Yeah.
That was the
Yeah,
deal,
yeah.
where when one group met, they had Yankee hats on, and they all took them off and put Red Sox in, the same 5 people. It didn't change anything, it's just,
Changes everything.
yeah. Well, that's what,
Yeah, let's be clear.
Kind of would.
My wife's a Yankees fan. So
I like her already.
Good, good. LFO, MFO, oh, sorry. LFO, MFO, again, you guys,
Yes.
governor and all that, pretty
That's new, that
self-explanatory.
you haven't heard about specifically from us, but yes, that's us. That could be
So,
me and. or-
We can put you in section 11, section,
He talked
yeah,
about.
section 11, section 14, we can
Yeah.
put you in all in one day as far as on that. The floor drain study, is bigger than what it is. That's probably gonna be HA Agriculture and VEC or, yeah,
There's yeah, A&R and,
A&R,
yeah.
okay.
I didn't I just noticed that this morning. haven't really.
Anson touched upon that a little
I
bit.
understand what the broader objective is, yeah, it would be, so that would be our two agencies, I think, primarily, but
But who brought that forward?
that might be, I don't know,
Was that Paul?
might be.
It might be Paul.
I don't know.
We'll ask Paul about that as well. And that gets us to the end.
The only thing I'd suggest there, I don't know. If sections 1 through 3, whatever that first group was. Maybe effective on passage. Those 3 sections and everything else July 1st, maybe it doesn't really matter.
It's not, I mean, it's not a bad idea, but I don't know that practically towns will be passing. My sense is towns have understood that this will be revisited and as far as I know, no one started any bylaws for this, but certainly no harm in putting.
Yeah, close the loop.
Yeah.
Kind of on it, I don't know.
Right. We'll certainly talk about that.
Yeah.
So that procedural stuff that I told you before, just need help with that.
Okay.
Any more questions about any of that stuff? Everybody good so far with what we've got? Okay. Okay. Anything else? You folks sound good?
Yeah, thank you so much for
Thank you.
all your time and attention.
Well, thank you.